Maoist versus state government. So, what is another interesting aspect of the conflict is the actors in the conflict, both non-state and state, they violate the law, they violate the human rights, they aggravate the conflict by their violations. So, in this conflict, for example, Maoists, by resorting to indiscriminate killings in the name of informants, security forces in the name of couriers to the Maoists, so they are killing ordinary people. It is also a violation of human rights. Another aspect in the conflict is media. So media is passing through a very testing time. Conflict is always a testing time for the media because after in the post-modern, particularly after the introduction of the 24/7 culture in India, an interesting aspect entered the media world, that is media logic. So here, journalists are governed by two factors. One is media logic. Media logic is the concept when media colonizes particular event and ultimately tries to benefit economically, financially from the particular event. So if media fails to colonize or a particular event or incident or conflict which does not qualify to be colonized, it simply ignores or it simply carries forward the line of the state. So this dichotomy in the media also contributing to the worsening of the human rights situation in the conflict areas. Mr. Mistry reminded us of Disturbed Areas Act. This Disturbed Areas Act of 1948 was first imposed in Andhra Pradesh in 1978. See the situation when the state government introduced this act in Andhra Pradesh. What was happening there? In Telangana area, all artisan communities, peasants, landless farmers, they formed into a Raitu Police and Farmers Association. So they fought against the landlord very peacefully. In fact, they were following the Gandhian method of struggle. They resorted to social boycott of all the landlords. So, instead of going into this the boycott, the socio-economic cause of the social boycott, state government, at the request of the landlords, introduced this Disturbed Areas Act. This act is so draconian that any police official, any executive magistrate of SI or above rank can open fire at any person whom the official thinks is a potential cause of disturbance. So this can be applied to the media, this can be applied to the workers of the Raitu Police or anyone whom the official doesn't like. So in this situation, see, so now what is happening in central India? The whole conflict and the repressive measures introduced by the government of India are simply a throwback to what happened in Telangana district in 1978. At that time, first all the landlords of the Telangana region, they have formed their own private armies. When the private armies started attacking the leaders of the farmers of this Raitu Kuli associations, Raitu Kuli Sangh, so they approached the People's War Party. People's War extended their support. This led to further violence. So instead of resolving this, state introduced Disturbed Areas Act. In the central Indian provinces also now, when the conflict began between the companies of mining companies and the Adivasis, again Maoists entered the scene. They extended their support to the fighting Adivasis. So instead of resolving the whole issue, instead of going into the reasons of this conflict, Government of India so launched a massive operation Green Hand program. So this also led to the escalation of the human rights violations. So human rights violation are the crucial aspect of this conflict. See, human rights violation normally takes place. Killings, tortures, rapes, arson, and expelling the villagers from their own areas and asking them to stay put in settlements or in other areas. So this sort of a regime where minimum human rights are not guaranteed. So it is a challenging situation for a media because state sees a journalist not as a journalist, as a representative of the fourth estate. State sees always suspect journalists as an agent of its rival. So this approach towards media always prevented. So the whole situation is in fact a challenging one for media because of these three reasons. One is state repression, another is inaccessibility of the Maoists, another, the third one is the media logic. These three factors prevent the journalists, individual journalists, from going into the issues and report them in an objective manner. So in fact, this objectivity itself is an indefinable one. So in the reporters in the conflict areas are polarized in fact. While some reporters carry the state line, others invariably sympathetic towards the Maoist areas. So people get only one line of information from these newspapers. That is always in the form of press notes from the information department, government, or some anonymous letters from the Maoist party or the rebels. Recently, what happened in Andhra Pradesh? Police are issuing Bandh calls in the name of Maoists. By evening, again they hold a press conference and say the response is very poor. People are not responding to the Maoist calls. So, human rights angle is a very dry aspect of the news reporting. Many of the, because it doesn't add any sensational element to the media and reporting, it is a very non-priority aspect of the reporting. So that's why generally all mainstream newspapers, they do not carry much importance to the human rights reports or for example the rights organizations fact-finding reports, everything. So that's why this morning in the documentary, they rightly said the percent of the human rights coverage in the newspapers, particularly in the print media, is just 2%. So, now, of course, Gautam is here. They have carried many fact-finding missions to Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Kashmir. As far as minority goes, their reports have not been carried in any of the mainstream newspapers. So whenever we get a report from the angle of human rights, it is invariably from the reporters who are working at the cutting edge level, that is the village level, where the conflict is raising. So Mafshal reporters, in fact, they contribute the original original stories, real human rights violations stories, but most of these reports are not given much importance. In the same document, one editor, I think NDTV editor, remarked a very objectionable point. He said, in Kashmir, reporters are at the cutting edge level. Some are tailors, some are small-time workers. See, they are called stringers. In fact, stringers are the very crucial point in the reporting network. You cannot employ a metallurgist in your mine. So you have to employ some manual laborers. So they supply the raw material and you have to process it in your office. So people who work in the official areas, they produce the raw material. You have to process the raw material and extract the human rights violations or any real objective story from the reporting. So instead of, in fact, in the day-to-day activity, see reporters like us who are working in the national capitals or state capitals do not face any problem from anybody because we are we work in the close proximity with the state. So I never get any threats, but my stringer, our stringer in an Adilabad district, he gets threatening calls from the police. He gets threatening midnight knocks at his door from the police. So he is always in the danger to his life. This is not the case with the reporters in the capitals. So calling a stringer is not inexperienced, is not trained, is objectionable in fact. They are the original barefoot soldiers in the whole network. So what is important is sensitizing the official reporters as far as the human rights are concerned is the need of the hour. Because all the human rights violations are treated as a human interesting stories. All the assaults, killings are just being reported as a tragedy story. See, the human rights angle in this instance is totally missing. This is happening because our stringers who work at the cutting edge level are not given proper training. So on their own, see, they are not graduated in mass communication colleges and all that because they work either for wages or no wages. So to improve the quality human rights reporting with a concern for the human rights, a intensive training for the reporters at the official level is very important. So organizations like the sponsors of this meeting, they should concentrate, they should shift their focus to the official correspondence. So they are the real purveyors of the news. We get a tip off from the official correspondence, then only we act upon these stories, gather information at the state level, get reports from the higher authorities. Such crucial, very important key points in the network, they don't have any protection, they don't get any salary, they don't even have accreditation cards. So this is the situation. So to improve the situation of the human rights reporting in the media, what is important is voluntary organizations or other bodies have to develop some courses or crash courses for these reporters. Then only we can see a semblance of human rights reporting in the newspapers. Otherwise, what we call this morning, all plans. Now plans are in fact replacing the page one news in all mainstream newspapers. So to prevent this aggravate, we have to train our correspondents in perceiving the human rights violations and the angles of human violation. We have some hope of improvement of the situation. Otherwise, now any human rights violation is a pillar in all newspapers except some local papers. So this is my concern. So I request these organizers try to organize such seminars or classes for the official correspondents who are very small time workers who either get or do not get these wages. Thank you. Thank you. So we enter the next phase of the session, discussion.
Since this is a legal session, is to remind people that one of the ways you can hold the state accountable is by keeping track of the state's obligations under the International Human Rights Framework and tracking that, because that's a really effective way of holding the state accountable to victims of harmful areas. The other thing is that you just mentioned how it's important to train stingers in rural areas. There are projects that are doing that, but one of the big difficulties that we face are sustainable models for our projects. And so that needs to be encouraged. Mainstream media needs to support citizen journalism in order for that flow of information to happen from the grassroots. And the last point is just that I think a lot of times we tune out of human rights reporting, or it doesn't get carried sufficiently because it's not solutions oriented, or we don't put a positive spin on a lot of stories. And I've seen that easy enough to turn a story on its head, and rather than reporting it from a gloomy perspective, if you talk about a success story, that tends to get a lot more eyeballs. So this is something to keep in mind. Oh, sorry, my name is Sapna, and I run an organization called WAVE, which is trying to build a nationwide network of women citizen journalists.
A couple of observations. I think just because we have the seminar on the role of media, too much responsibility is being loaded onto the media. So, especially the new economic, especially the LPG regime, the liberalization, privatization, and globalization. When market is taking over the economy, we have seen in India, especially in post-1990s, around Narasimha Rao's government, that the government or the state is in the responsibility abdicating syndrome. It's now more of a regulatory state instead of being a state which governs. Do you expect that such governments or such states would actually be in a position to deliver justice? Because it's all, we all say that it's going to be on market. We have this, we have it from our Kashmiri friends about a lot of talk about government ads. The way media has been corporatized everywhere. I have quite a few friends in our media who they are not very happy with receiving government ads because the rate of government ads is much lesser than what they get from the corporates. So, we listen to you now, you please.
I'm very glad.
I was slightly startled that media is responsible for the handout status of the state. That was, I think, a bit too much. It is a sweeping statement which comes, No, I don't think so. The media has a minuscule contribution in providing the state a handout status. Rather, what is a total, I think, a concept which, or a perception which sweeps everywhere, is, and it does affect the media, an anti-state status or an anti-state stance by anybody is normally confused with anti-national. So that does provide some level of, but then this is that anti-state stance being confused with anti-national is a colonial legacy. which needs to be broken. And it is still, it percolates not only from one place, it percolates right from the legislature. It percolates from your parliament. That you speak against the Prime Minister, you are anti-national. That is one, again, that media is creating a illegal frame of legality. I think maybe we have to try and get it. Media is not in the process of constructing anywhere. We are in whatever the limited resources we have. Our friend said that media has freedom of press. We don't have a freedom of press in India. Unlike the US Constitution, we don't have a freedom of press. We have granted that freedom of expression which is available to every citizen. And like every citizen, the freedom of expression is given to you in Article 19(1)(a), it is taken away in Article 1(b). And if the state decides that, okay, we have to arrest all the journalists one day, they are very well within the legal framework. So, instead, instead of that media is responsible in many other ways. Okay, media has come into a limelight. Breaking news does make raise eyebrows. It's because the basic problem with the functioning of the Indian democracy, the other three pillars, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, have crumbled, and the only pillar of hope which now seems available to the people is media, the fourth pillar, and even that is being impacted. Instead of loading the media to bring up your democracy, I think we should be coming out, and media would be happy to contribute in this, that we revive and strengthen our other three pillars, that are legislature, the executive, and the judiciary in the justice delivery system. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, and with the permission of Mr. Rajesh Vadyal, I will not be here tomorrow, and I believe that there is a recommendation session on actions. So with your both permission, I'll make few points which will be generic to everyone. As I have listened for the last 2 days, the deliberation that's going on. But first, about the RTI, about the Armed Forces Special Provisions, national security, and what is a state. I'm not going legal. I'm talking in a political science way. First of all, the armed forces never wanted to have any extra power. The armed forces were provided power under the aid to civil power for very specific purposes in a disturbed situation when the collector could call aid to civil power. The Armed Forces Special Power Act in very other form existed right from